Traders, how are you? With Marcello. Today we're doing the recap of what happened in the markets last week. We have Elon Musk firing executives at Twitter after he finally bought it. Everybody canceled, so even the has canceled Kanye West. We have an escalation in the war in Ukraine with a drone attack, and we have a more serious problems with drying rivers that are drying up in the United States and energy in Europe as well. Let's go ahead and get started. We finally have some good news. The market went up overall this week, especially in the US and Canada. The Dow, which is one of the major exchanges in the United States, if you guys aren't from the US, soared to its best month in 84 years so far. This is the eye-wateringly speculative YOLO buying. So, you guys remember when the market just kept going up, when it went down a little bit, everybody just bought, and then it just kept going up. This is basically what's happening now, where everybody's just like, let's just go for it. And everybody's just, you only live once. Let's just throw the retirement account at the stock market, see if it goes up. And that's what happened this week. Overall, we had the main reason situation this week was the fact that we had a lot of corporate earnings that were pretty good. Meta, which is the owner of Facebook, and also Amazon literally had catastrophic weeks. But towards the end of the week, we had Apple with really good numbers that basically saved the overall stock market. Overseas market news, mostly positive. We have Russia going up over 6%, then Spain, Germany, and Italy all at around the 4% mark. Latin American markets are mostly higher as well, with the Bovespa. They have big elections this week for the presidential election between Lula and Bolsonaro. They went down, only negative market in Latin America this week. Africa and the Middle East, mostly mixed, with Egypt going up almost 8%. And then in the far east, we have the Hang Seng going down over 9%, whereas India going up over 3%, mostly mixed there in the far east. Bitcoin and other cryptocurrency news, not a whole lot of crypto news other than the fact that the government coins are coming and they're going to control every aspect of your life. Should I hit it? Should I? But not really a lot of major news overall this week. Bitcoin is up over 8%. It closed at just over 19,000. It brushed 20,000 also this week. It's still down for the year over 55%, whereas year over year, it's down over 66%. Commodities, there was a big drone strike in one of the ships in Russia. So now Russia has removed the deal for exporting grain after the drone attacks. So after kind of things going maybe a little bit better, now it's starting to escalate again. Remember that Ukraine is known as the breadbasket of Europe because the amount of food that they produce, not only for Europe, but also for African countries, for example. And Russia is still one of the major exporters in the world as well. This is, again, going to be a very big problem, especially when we combine that with situations like the governments, for example, in the Netherlands, which is the second largest exporter of food in the world, trying to shut down a lot of the farming because of the quote unquote damage it does to the environment. And then we also have a situation where there's the supply chain where they move things. For example, the Mississippi River in the United States, a major piece of transport, literally they can't transport anymore because it's at a record low now. Remember that the Rhine River, which is the part of the border between France and Germany, also had the same situation. Remember those stones that were appearing that said from the previous drought, it said, if you read this, weep. So hopefully things are going to get better sooner than later. 26 of France's 56 nuclear reactors are offline for pipe corrosion or maintenance. France being before one of the major exporters of energy in the world, which right now that's basically what Europe needs, especially after the explosion of the pipelines. So they're literally, or they're going to freeze, or they're going to literally, remember last week I reported to you guys how Poland and Germany, they're burning masks and garbage to be able to stay warm. Now that's not going to affect the environment. We're just going to waive those rules now when people are dying of cold. It's going to be a shame what happens there because I don't think most people aren't talking about the winter enough, and I think this is going to be a very big problem. I mentioned the Mississippi River and the tributaries have dropped their record lows. Big problem. Remember that the dams that are over in the west, those are also going dry as well. They've had to shut down some of the energy producing reservoirs that we've had over there as well. U.S. crude for the week up 3.35%, almost $88. Brent, which is the international crude, went up over 2.40% to close to 96. We had a bit of a retracement in the U.S. dollar. We've had this huge surge in the U.S. dollar everywhere, especially here in Colombia, for example, which I highly recommend you come and visit because it's so cheap right now. Gold went down 0.74% to 1,646, and my favorite market of all, silver, down 0.93% to $19.34. Financial and banking news, the economy, or I should say more like the society of the United States, is literally teetering on the brink between the surge in inflation on everyday items that we buy and wages not going up enough to counterseed that inflation. We have a situation where 63% of all Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. And this is essentially what happens when an economy deteriorates, right? We have a situation where a strong economy, the biggest chunk of, I don't want to say the wealth, but let's call it the biggest class is the middle class. That's what basically runs the economy. We still have poor people, we still have rich people, but generally that middle class is the biggest chunk. And that provides most of the jobs. You know, it's a really big piece of the economy. Now we have a situation where the middle class is being destroyed essentially, and we're only going to be left with poor people and rich people. And that's basically what's going on right now. 50% of all American workers last year made less than $3,133 a month. More than 30% of workers made less than $20,000 a year. More than 41% of Americans made less than $30,000 a year. More than 52% less than $40,000, and more than 62% of all Americans made less than $50,000 a year. So if you're making more than $50,000 a year, you're literally in the 1% based on the world. So keep that in mind. We're still very lucky, live a very good lifestyle compared to the rest of the world. Me, that I've been around the world a few times, the poverty I've seen and the situations that are horrible, we have it pretty good in the United States. Consumer prices in Singapore went up by 7.5% in September. The inflation in Australia hit a 32-year high in quarter three at 7.3%. Inflation in Germany surged to 10.4%. Now look at these numbers, right? 7%, 10%, 7%. Wages, the amount that you get paid at a company, aren't going up 7%, right? But the amount of money that they're making is still going up. You see how it works? Inflation in Germany, I mentioned that one. And then the ECB is announced, I should say, on Thursday, 75-point rate hike for the entire Eurozone. Again, the entire world is continuing to increase the interest rates. And what does that mean? Since we live in a over-financialized world, there's a situation where they raised interest rates. That's going to put a big set of brakes on the world economy due to the fact that everything is so financialized now. We've become accustomed to these lower interest rates. And the same house, for example, that would have taken, I have the same house, random, I'm going to see if here it is. So a $600,000 house in 2021 with a 3% interest rate was just over $2,000 mortgage payment. And now in 2022, the same house that's worth less with a 7% interest rate, the mortgage payment is over $3,000. So it's gone up more than 50%. And that's why the interest rates matter so much. Political news, a New York Supreme Court ruled that public employees fired for not getting the thing in your arm from the vaccine must be given their jobs back with back pay. I don't know if you guys saw the Katy Perry was doing I want you guys to look this up on YouTube, but she was doing a presentation and she had like an eye spasm, which is the same thing that happened to Justin Bieber. Probably just a coincidence. A Senate report concludes also that the pandemic came from a quote unquote research-related incident. I'm gonna hit the conspiracy theory button again. But remember, that was just a conspiracy theory. Couldn't have come from a lab. It came from a bat, remember? They literally banned people from social media for saying that. And now all of a sudden, well, it was just an incident maybe that, that happened over in China. Xi Jinping, speaking of China, at 69 years old, is continuing his rule over the Communist Party and leading it into his second decade. He now has a third term, not to be rivaled from the last, essentially, dictator, Mao. The previous not emperor, but the previous president, let's say, of China was escorted from the Communist Party event that they were having, and no, they didn't give a reason why. So he's basically getting rid of his rivals. Rishi Sunak, which is a 42-year-old former finance minister, could possibly be the new prime minister in the UK and the first of Indian origin if he is chosen. And the Biden administration is now starting to lower their optimism about the midterm elections, since it's now possible that they may lose power in both chambers of Congress. Remember that right now, the left, the Democrats, literally are running absolutely everything. So if things aren't going great for you, you know who to blame. High inflation, crime, obviously education, immigration, all kinds of stuff that they do in these polls. In economic news, China reported that they had a 3.9% expansion, which is good for them, even though they were growing at 6, 7, 8% before, but they still have a weak set of imports and also retail sales, which indicates that the second largest economy in the world is having a situation with domestic demand. With Xi Jinping getting a third term, they're going to continue with their zero COVID policy, which basically means that if there's one case that appears, they're going to shut down entire cities, which obviously is not good for China and not good for the rest of the world. Consumer confidence fell in October more than expected to a 3-month low. Obviously, this has to do with the situation with inflation. The consumer spending, remember, is the biggest portion of the economy in most advanced economies around the world. In the United States, it's almost 70%. So if the confidence of consumers, which are the people that are going out and spending money, which is 70% of the economy, goes down, that means that they're going to spend less money, which means that the economy is not going to do well. The U.S. is now officially out of a recession now that we've had an expansion at 2.6% in Q3. Remember that the definition of a recession before they decided to change it this year was 2 quarters of negative growth. So we're technically out of that. So we'll see what happens next year, because I think we're still probably headed for a recession. And in corporate news, Starbucks is down over 5%, mostly on concerns in China because of the situation that I just mentioned with the zero COVID policy. GM, which is the largest U.S. automaker, says that they had better than expected earnings due to the fact that they were able to clear their inventory of 75% of the 90,000 vehicles that they couldn't sell before because they couldn't find the parts to be able to sell them. Now remember that this may not get better because of the situation with the supply chain. We have the Mississippi River not being navigable anymore. I always do the Spanish videos first, so I always think in Spanish when I do the videos in English. And we also have a situation where, if you remember the diesel inventories, diesel being what feeds the trucks that literally transport everything in the US, is down to about just over 20 days. So if we don't have any more diesel, you literally are not going to even see food at the grocery store. Coca-Cola went up 2.34%. Their predicted strategy of hiking prices while offering more affordable options gave them better sales growth. PayPal rose 7.11% now that Amazon is adding a Venmo payment option, which is owned by PayPal. And just so you guys know, after the huge backlash that they had about adding the terms and conditions where they're literally just going to charge you $2,500 in your account if you spread quote unquote misinformation, they added that back quietly to their terms and conditions. So you probably should close your PayPal account. Microsoft went down 7% after their net income went down by over 14%. And I mentioned also that Meta Platforms, which is the owner of Facebook, their overall net income was down over 52%. The stock is now down 70% in 2022, and Zucks has lost over $100 billion of his net worth. Amazon also had really bad numbers. They went down almost 20% for the week after they reported not only bad earnings, but also bad forecasting, especially for sluggish holiday sales. And Apple, which is what saved the stock market, in my opinion, this week, they reported record revenue. And so they went up quite a bit. They're still down for the year, however, in 2022. Trade news: prior to the war in Ukraine, Russia was still the #1 fuel exporter globally, including coal, gas, and oil. The oil consumption is still expected to go down by 1.7 million barrels a day in 2023. But the world population is still growing, which means that the world is still going to need Russian oil, which means that the sanctions are basically pointless because they're not working. Technology: WhatsApp experienced a global outage on Tuesday, I don't know if you guys have noticed, we have internet cables being cut in Europe. We have other sites going down. This, like an app like Facebook or WhatsApp literally never went down before, maybe once every few years. And now we're starting to see this repeatedly. I think this is going to continue to escalate. Scientists also have discovered a method of making magnets for wind turbines and electric cars. There's a set of materials, if you guys didn't know, called rare earth metals that are rarer than gold and silver, for example. It's a big disadvantage of the United States because since we have such strong environmental protections, in China literally owns about 80% of the market. And obviously, since we have some tensions with China, especially since I think they're going to probably go after Taiwan, we can't go after China like we go after Russia, right? So now they're using a new technique that they developed to make what's called tetratenite, I think it's called. And that can actually be used to be able to replace the rare earth metals that are going into wind turbines and batteries, which is great technology progress. Tesla is cutting its prices of its Model 3 and Model Y by as much as 9% in China on Monday, reversing a previous trend. Remember that Elon Musk reported that he was starting to see the commodity prices going down instead of going up in the recent inflation data. German sportswear Adidas, in addition to the Gap, Balenciaga, the Sun has canceled Kanye West because of his anti-Semite comments. So we'll see how it recovers from that. Adidas is set to lose about roughly $250 million a year from breaking their agreement with Yeezy. And Elon Musk officially closed his acquisition with Twitter. He immediately fired the CEO, CFO, and the censor-in-chief. I forgot her name. He also fooled CNBC. He sent two people with boxes outside, and CNBC reported they were engineers that were getting fired, and it was literally just a joke. I thought that was hilarious. I don't know if you guys saw the meme where he was literally walking into the Twitter headquarters with a sink, and he wrote on Twitter, "Let that sink in." So he's now the chief tweet, as he put on Twitter, and according to sources, he's expecting to reduce the staff by 75%. Mercedes-Benz is going to withdraw from the market in Russia, in addition to other automakers as well, obviously due to the situation with the sanctions and the war in Ukraine. And according to the National Association of Realtors, U.S. pending home sales have collapsed 31% year over year, much worse than expected from August to September at over 10%. And now the market is at its lowest level pending sales since June 2010. Get ready because a storm is coming. And in unusual facts this week, unfortunately, in Germany, there were another pair of climate protesters that threw food at a Claude Monet painting that sold for $110 million in 2019. Luckily, it didn't sustain any damage because they put it behind glass. And there was also other climate activists that were arrested in London for throwing cake at a wax statue of King Charles III. That's the news for this week, guys. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Don't forget to subscribe. And remember, the preppers were right.